Welcome to another episode of Unsourced Wall. As always, I'm your host, Elvis, and this is going to be a pretty exciting episode. Not only do we have a long stretch of really sort of unexpected news, but I'm also going to be doing a spoiler cast on two recent summer releases. Those would be The Incredibles 2 and The Death of Superman direct-to-video adaptation. Second time they tried this, I've already said my thoughts on the old one, Superman Doomsday, and I'll repeat some of those as well. And then more fantastic listener questions. It's looking to be a really fun one, so without further ado, let's get on into it. Now with news, this is pretty insane, but the one thing I want to get out immediately that I'm completely excited about is that Snagglepuss, the recent miniseries from Mark Russell, is actually getting staged at the Tennessee Williams Theater Festival as an actual play, which is incredible. It's so out of left field. I don't know how to process it. It's going to be on September 30th from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. So that's an hour and 15 minutes for 6 issues that cover a large spread of events. I wonder how exactly they're going to do it. And I really want to go to this. I need to make sure that there's time available where I can totally make this trip. You can buy tickets now. You can buy a pass to the festival itself. And there's all sorts of links. I'll put the link in the description. But it is really an incredible thing. Snagglepuss in the comic is very much drawing from Tennessee Williams' life, and there was some of that in cartoon too, where it drew a little bit from that whole southern sort of playwright character or an archetype. To see this come full circle is really astounding. It was a great miniseries, and hopefully it is a great play. And the one thing I really want to see is in the comic, you have human actors putting on animal face to play dogs and cats and all sorts of characters that aren't their species in Snagglepuss's plays. And I really wonder how they might translate that to an actual play. Will it be human actors in the animal face in human face or something like that? I don't know. It just seems like such a crazy thing, and it is pretty amazing. It is just a shock, and hopefully it goes well because it really does deserve it. It really honestly does. If you're interested in the comic, read it. If that interests you, then definitely check this out. I'm going to see if I can. Our next bit of news isn't as incredibly exciting or outlandish, but is still kind of a shock. DC Comics is finally going to reprint the original comic book epic from the Golden Age, Captain Marvel versus the Monster Society of Evil. The old Beck and Binder classic. It is incredible. I am in shock because they have announced this before. They've announced plans that have always fallen through to collect this story arc because it is the first comic book story arc probably of all time, not counting the serialized comic book strips. It was the first time in a comic book where they did this whole long form story, and it lasted 2 years. So it was a huge gamble as to whether or not readers who were used to comic books just being one-off little short tales would have the patience and the actual engagement to follow this through to the end, and they did, and it was a landmark moment in comic book history. But the one thing always keeping it from being republished, it had gotten a small little third-party publishment like a couple of decades ago, but that was only because these stories are now in the public domain. But to get back on it, the only thing really keeping this from being published was the controversy over Steamboat, who is a side character and kind of sidekick in this story. And in some of the Golden Age Captain Marvel stuff, he is pretty much a racist caricature with the very coal black skin and huge pink lips that cover like the entire lower half of the face, that whole thing. And it is definitely something where I can understand why they would be put off publishing this, because it is such a scandalous thing, and if they don't handle it right, and if they would get into like a PR nightmare over it, it might not be worth it because Captain Marvel isn't that popular in general to like the public audience. So I'm glad they're doing it, and I understand, that it is a very touchy subject and this is a very touchy character. But it is still such a great story. It's still so full of fun and wonder and just excitement. Mr. Mind is fantastic. Ibok is fantastic. A lot of these little asides, like where Mr. Mind opens up a movie academy and a different school, and he writes a book that goes viral across the world called Mein Kampf. It's fucking amazing. It is so hilarious and just a lot of fun. and also pretty racist because of Steamboat and, of course, other characters like Nippo, who was the Yellow Terror villain that they had. So it's got a lot of things that will polarize it for sure. But overall, I'm happy they're reprinting it, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Next up is that Robert Kirkman's comic, Invincible, is being optioned to be a cartoon for Amazon. They bought the rights, they're gonna do it. Honestly, it's probably the best thing for this series because they just finished, they have like 150 issues or so to make a series out of and not have any dragging or not have things to explore. Even as a person who enjoys the series and who read the series and notices its highs and lows, there were some things that Invincible did which could have been pepped up a bit. It sometimes doesn't explore or take advantage of several story beats that it could have, and it's not as though these story beats would have impacted the larger, grander narrative now that it's all complete and we can see the full scope and focus of the series. So this is definitely something which could last a long time if Amazon does play their cards right, and if they do take care of the series as an adaptation. It's not something that will definitely have that problem that some adaptations have where they have to make so much concessions in order to elongate stuff because there's a huge breadth of material, and even then some of that stuff could have been expanded upon. So that's great news, and I can't wait to see it. I hope they do it well because it can at times be an extremely fun comic and at times be an extremely stupid one. So balance is all I'm asking for in an adaptation. Balance. Speaking of adaptations, Lucifer has been saved by Netflix. They're going to do a 2-part season that continues on and hopefully wraps up some of the threads from the previous finale, which was on a bit of a cliffhanger. I've heard from other people that the cliffhanger itself could have worked with some finality, and so they're happy to see it continue, but that the finale as it was, if it had become a series finale in full, wouldn't have been such a stretch. The whole split season thing is something that Netflix has been doing with some of its live action shows and some of its cartoons as well, where they're splitting it up and releasing it in chunks. So that's not a surprise. And hopefully that being on Netflix maintains the quality for the fans. That's what I most care about. I might not be a huge fan of the show myself, but it's honestly really nice that the fans and the fan base for Lucifer has this chance at closure and seeing the characters wrap up in a much more fulfilling way than they probably would have when cut off like that. Our last bit of news, real news, is that it seems that Disney, which has now really bumped up its offer for Fox, is going to win the bidding war. Comcast, as it stands, and as I understand it, was already stretching the limits of its debts and resources in order to create the previous bid, while Disney is now just going above and beyond with theirs. And Fox released a statement saying that they feel that Disney's is the superior offer and that they will be making plans to move forward with it and the voting. And like I said, I don't really care. They're both mega corporations. It doesn't matter in a larger scale sense. Other than that, I heard a lot of tweets about X-Men fans rejoice. And I'm like, why would anyone need to rejoice? It's just characters. And even then, it's not like X-Men have been done dirty by Fox. Like I said before, only 2 bad movies. The rest are all decent to pretty good. And there's 2 recent shows which are pretty great. So, there's no need to rejoice. They're just moving someplace else. And hopefully Disney will have the foresight to keep the things going. I don't think they would work in MCU. At least the Fantastic Four will have another chance to get a decent movie out. On an aside, tangential news note, apparently Bendis is introducing the Nuclear Man for an arc, or maybe even a few issues, in his Superman run. I mean, he introduced the Fly Twins in Ultimate Spider-Man, so it's not like something he hasn't done before. It's just weird that it became such a big little news item. Get Lenny Luthor in there, and then you got me thinking, because otherwise it's just going to be another thing. He's probably going to just be like a raving madman and then be killed off in one issue. Anyway, let's get to what I read this week, because it was a pretty satisfying week. First was the miniseries finale of Planet of the Apes Ursus, a tie-in comic that tells the backstory to Ursus, the general from beneath the Planet of the Apes, who in that movie, as I mentioned when I previously brought up this series a few episodes ago, is one of the worst characters in the entire franchise. And I don't mean worse in that he's so villainous, but worse in that he is just so underwritten and so boring and flat. The only purpose to him is to be hammy and to have some sort of critique on war. The Vietnam War was on the mind at the time the movie was made. There's even ape protesters doing make peace not war type posters. It was such a ridiculous movie. It's one of my favorites, but that whole aspect was always ridiculous. And Planet of the Apes Ursus is probably a masterpiece, I have to say, a masterpiece for this franchise. It takes Ursus and it effortlessly builds a connection to the main themes of the series and to a lot of the core aspects of Beneath Planet of the Apes, and even into the original, working backwards to create a streamlined, connective narrative that really brings everything together around this character, and it works. It really does work, and it ends on such a great note. It is such a great miniseries, and for a fan of the franchise, I love it. And I think it works best as Planet of the Apes 2.5. It adds so much to Beneath Planet of the Apes that I can read it and watch Planet of the Apes alongside each other, and they complement each other perfectly. It doesn't take away, it only adds. That's what a good tie-in comic should be. It's not something that is trying to draw focus away. It draws all the focus to Beneath Planet of the Apes, while also grounding it a lot more and creating a foundation that Beneath the Planet of the Apes as a movie doesn't quite have for the characters and the arcs in it. It's a bit cliche. The comic does pull from some old, tired tropes, but the writing is great and the imagery of the movies are solid enough that it works. It stays floating. It stays buoyant. I definitely recommend it. It was such a great read, and I am really happy that I discovered it just by happenstance. Anyway, after that was The New Challengers number 2. I think this is going to be the last issue that actually has one of the Kuberts on art. So that makes it the second most that any artist on this metal spin-off line to keep going. Jim Lee didn't even do the full first issue, so he's at the bottom, and then comes Kubert. So, it has that on it. Honestly, I still enjoy this series, and I know it got downgraded to a 6-issue mini, but the second issue is still pretty good. It moves the plot forward. But still, my main problem with this series is that it feels like it's going to be cut down. It feels like it was just an opening arc. It doesn't feel like it was meant to be one continuous story for 6 issues. It feels like, okay, we're going to set everything up and then continue on the ongoing. And that's a really big problem, because it's always in my mind that it's going to get canceled at number 6. Or it's going to end at number 6 because it's a mini series, which it really wasn't. That's a bit of a shame. The only issue with this issue as a actual story is that Aquaman shows up for no fucking reason and then fucks off. So it was kind of pointless to have him in there, and I hate cameos so early on in a series. Same thing happened with Damage, same thing happened here. It's just like, we don't need these cameos. Set up the characters first, set up why they can be good. They don't need all this extraneous help. It doesn't have anything to do with the story as it's being told. It just distracts. Kind of like dangling a shiny object in front of a toddler. It's not worth it. Honestly, hope the third issue up to the 6th is still just a solid opening arc, if that's all it's going to be. They're heading to Skartaris in the Warlord series in the next issue, so that's going to be fun, and I can't wait for that. Fingers crossed. Lastly is The Wildstorm number 14, which is rapidly becoming one of my favorite series. It was already a great series that I enjoyed reading every month, but it is probably going to go down as one of my favorites of all time because of how well it continues on the story as it unfolds, bringing all these character threads and loops back into it. And I've said before, especially with regards to other comics, I love a series that knows where the plot is headed to and how to unfold and to twist and reveal a lot of the things that are going down. I love how it definitely and almost perfectly setting the foundation for other series like Gen 13. This issue is probably the Gen 13 Rosetta Stone for this universe, for this reboot, because of how everything in it, from the small character interactions to the dialogue to the art, they all seed into it. They all lay the groundwork for the core tenets and themes of that series, especially that original run, because of how well Ellis writes John Lynch and the responsibility and regret that he feels about what he's done to this version of Team 7 called Project Thunderbook. It was definitely a large part of the original run, and I can't wait to see it come to fruition in a full Gen 13 series. And I hope that Ellis writes that, because I think he's done such a great job with John Lynch and in setting up the future dynamic with him and the Gens. I understand that Ellis isn't one of the most hip and fun writers at times, so maybe he's not the best choice for a series that's well known for being very energetic and enthusiastic, but I can live with that as long as the dynamics and the character interplay between him and the Gens are still rock solid. And so far, his handling of John Lynch has given me that hope. Anyway, I am reading Man of Steel, but since it's a weekly and it's almost done anyway, I'm going to wait until it's all complete and then do a full review of that. Because honestly, issue to issue, I just can't really give much of a care. It's Bendis, so I want to see how it plays out first and really dig into what it had done. So that's it for that. We're headed into the spoiler section, so down below, I'm going to add in 2 time codes. One to skip the spoilers for The Incredibles 2, which I'll be handling first, and then one to skip the spoilers for Death of Superman. So if you want to skip both, just head to the time code for that one that I'll leave below. Or if you want to skip just the first or either or, there'll be both options there. So heading right on into it right now. The Incredibles 2. Now, I am not the biggest fan of the original. I liked it as a kid, but that was pretty much it. It's nothing that really grabbed me. I thought it was okay, and I never thought about it since then. I never thought I needed a sequel. And honestly, I still don't think it needed a sequel, despite the fact that I actually enjoyed the sequel. I know there's been a lot of complaints that this sequel retreads the original, and I think that has both merits because it is a template, but also not really, in that a lot of the things that the sequel does are extrapolations of the ending of the original. I know the ending of the original promised a lot more. Like at the end of the original Incredibles, they all have their masks on and they all racing off to fight the Underminer, right? But in essence, nothing was really changed at that point. They were still illegal. They were still doing criminal activities by being superheroes. And so making that the focus of the sequel, of actually affecting that change, is a good move. Otherwise, it's just leapfrogging over a vital step just because they say, well, they weren't planning a sequel when The Incredibles 1 came out. It was just meant to be a standalone feature. So having that moment cap off the ending of the original makes sense because you want to have that final sort of closure moment to it. Like, all right, so we're not going to see any more of the adventures, but, don't worry, they'll be doing superhero stuff. But now that they had to make a sequel, they have to address that because otherwise it's just kind of a faulty plot point. And the way they handled it, I thought was pretty good. Elastigirl obviously would be the least problematic choice to go into because of the entire reason for superheroes, at least initially getting banned, was because of the collateral damage. That whole opening sequence in the first with Mr. Incredible just doing whole smash and grabs because he's a brick superhero. That's what he's really going to lean into when he's fighting crime. Elastigirl, elastic. So it's not something that's going to at least necessarily lead to widespread destruction and chaos and lead to very bad press, the very exact same press that got them all outlawed. Focus on her, set in the 60s, do the whole sort of, I can do better, you can do better kind of bullshit. It's well done. It's well thought out. It's probably one of the better plotted out sequels I've ever seen because it takes all this other shit into consideration. It could have just easily leapfrogged, but then that would have been really much more of a cheat than just, actually trying to follow through. If they make a third one, then at least the third one will have been earned because of the second one. And honestly, a lot of the stuff was pretty fun. And there's nothing really I can complain about it story-wise. I thought story-wise it was pretty tight and pretty much exactly what you would expect. I know that people have also been saying, that's not right, it's been 14 years. But why would that matter? Quality is quality. 14 years later doesn't mean that there's some sort of feedback effect where 14 years later needs to be some sort of mega extravaganza. They're both pretty good. It's something that I've just been hearing and it just got me a bit annoyed because what's the expectations? You want a good movie? It's a good movie. Maybe the ending could have been a bit tighter. Honestly, one of the things that it has made me think about is that I honestly don't like the idea of them fighting crime as a family. I know that was a huge complaint, that this sequel, they don't fight crime as a family. It's the same kind of basic template as the original, where the parent are off getting in trouble and then the kids have to rush in at the end and then they have to fight together for that one last action sequence with some coordination. But honestly, I think that when you have very young kids like that, one who's a baby, one who's 10, and one who's barely a teenager, then that becomes kind of a problem because I know that they are super strong, they have superpowers, but they're still kids and you're still going to be putting them into threats. I like the idea that they only come as a family because the situation necessitates it. And I think a third one, I wouldn't mind if they stop petty crime, but huge supervillains, I hope that they don't ever fight crime as a family until the ending where it becomes the only way to win. At least then you can ignore the fact that they're throwing a baby around to make it shoot laser beams out of its eyes. The imagery and the whole sort of tone of it doesn't really sit well. Overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I might have enjoyed it even more than the original. Like I said, I didn't enjoy the original that much. I thought it was okay. This one I actually pretty enjoyed. I thought it was pretty fun. I thought it handled itself well, and the whole thematic cores of it were all incredibly done. Like I said, I wouldn't mind a third movie because I think there's so much more they could do with it, especially now that they have this one out of the way. But in terms of the greater scope of things, they work exceedingly well as a duology. The whole Rebirth of Superheroes plot is executed very finely between this one and the previous one. So there's not much more story you can tell if that's your main core plot. So honestly, if you enjoyed the first one, I had to say that this one is definitely going to really, I think, scratch an itch. And whether or not you had really high expectations or really hard feelings for the original, is it really going to warp sort of how you take away certain things from this one. If you treat it as something that is an actual sequel that carries forward the story, then it works perfectly. But you're treating it as some sort of 14 years in the making event, of course it's going to fall short because that's not what it's meant to be. It's not meant to be something that was planned for 14 years and they were waiting to just get the right epic plot. No, they didn't want to make a sequel. They weren't making the first one with future sequels in mind, and it is something like, okay, how to make a sequel to this, and they did what any writer does. They figure out a feasible way to continue the story, and they did, and it worked. And honestly, there's so much things to love about this movie. Jack was great, Edna Mode was great, the villain was really sort of visually interesting and fun, the fights were great. It was just a nice little story. It was a nice little movie. I recommend it, and it's nothing that's going to break the bank because it is so classic. And that's pretty much all one can really say and take away from it. Definitely one of my favorite superhero movies of this year. If last year went to Captain Underpants, this year goes to Incredibles 2. Alright, moving ahead into The Death of Superman. This is the second time they tried to use this story for a direct-to-video movie. The first time was a couple years ago with Superman Doomsday, which, as I've said before, was horrible, horrible crap. It wasn't really about the Superman, and it wasn't really about Doomsday or any of that whole story. It was just a very cheap and very flimsy, bizarro Superman type plot where it was just a huge mess, and the only thing that had any sort of semblance connection to the original story was that a rock monster called Doomsday killed Superman. And that only took like 5 minutes in that movie. And the rest was just this really hackneyed story about Lex Luthor doing some crazy ass shit. So in that sense, this has to be a lot more faithful, even if it's not much more faithful at all, because of one vital aspect. The Death of Superman, the direct-to-video movie, is a story that is in continuity with these new 52 adaptations they've been doing. So you end up having Justice League War, Justice League Throne of Atlantis, Son of Batman, Teen Titans versus Justice League, and pretty much all of those are all set in one universe, one canon. So Death of Superman is a great retelling while being limited by having to adhere to this new universe they've set up. It's not something like when DC animated The Dark Knight Returns, which was just this two-parter that was completely cut off and meant to be a very strict retelling of the comic. This isn't. They're doing the same kind of thing where they're making it into two parts. One called Death of Superman, the next part coming out next year probably going to be called The Return of Superman. And they're eventually, very likely, 100%, they're going to release a full edited cut, just like they did with The Dark Knight Returns. It has a lot more pulling against it. I would have liked something more faithful. I think that if we're being completely honest, out of the movie adaptations of this story, at least of this segment, the Death segment, Batman vs. Superman is probably the most faithful, because in that you have a lot of the finer details and thematic stuff from the comic definitely carried over. You have Lois Lane and Superman being in a relationship, probably about to get married. You have a young Lex Luthor who is still a media darling. And you have just all of that weighing down Superman as he heads into battle with Doomsday. And probably the most important part, at least, of the actual climactic fight is that Doomsday and Superman go out taking each other out, which none of these seem to get right except for Batman vs. Superman. It becomes a byproduct where Superman is pretty much already dying and he just ends up luckily killing Doomsday as well. It's not this whole thing where their one final stab at each other or punch at each other ends up pretty much being the last blow for both of them, which I think only Batman vs. Superman got right, as well as the whole emotional backdrop of Lois and him already being in this committed relationship about to make the next step forward. In this, though, they have to accept that Superman is still in his younger days. He doesn't have the same wealth of foundation that he had in the early 90s when this whole storyline was being put out. It's something where I have to come to terms with, yes, it's not faithful and it's not quite accurate. It doesn't go through the same kind of beats. But if I have just to focus on the fact that it has to tell the story that's been built up within this series of movies, then it's pretty much perfect. There's not much you can do without drastically trying to retcon stuff in. There's even a point of a character introduction that doesn't even happen in this movie. It happened in Throne of Atlantis, which was like 3 or 4 years ago. That should have been in this movie. Because at this point, when they mention it, it had become such a thing where like, wait, did that happen? And I didn't even remember. I saw Throne of Atlantis where this character introduced, where Steel is actually introduced. But it becomes such a non-entity in this own movie where it's meant to have thematic weight. And a lot of things are like that. They replaced the whole, they're in a committed relationship and about to make the next step where you had the whole gravity of him dying. With him saying I love you to Lois for the first time. That is an adequate substitution. It doesn't really change much. It's still pretty heavy. They can't just leapfrog into the whole married thing. Obviously, Peter Tomasi, who wrote this movie, was trying to make connections, trying to make it a lot more fluidly serve the universe. Other than that, this movie did a lot of world building for the series. So there are things where you have Intergang having murder boxes. You have Doomsday coming from a boom tube instead of either being already deep beneath the earth or coming as a random asteroid. They're definitely building up Darkseid as a threat, and I have to believe that Darkseid War is going to be the next adaptation. And you have characters theorizing that Doomsday was meant as a weapon specifically to kill Superman. It's not standalone enough. It feels standalone though because they are able to really kind of sidestep and keep the focus centric on Superman, which is what you expect. It's pretty much still a Justice League movie. It's still falling forward from the themes and things that are set up in the previous Justice League direct-to-video movies in this series, but it definitely tries to downplay them. And that's both beneficial because now Superman in the focus, and now Lois in the focus, and now with all of these different character cores in the center, the story does feel a lot more engaging rather than spread out as it could have been. But it's also detrimental in that now you have this league kind of being in there without contributing much. It's not like the comics where it was the kind of B team just because all the other heavy hitters were either off planet, busy, or in some sort of status quo wreck. You have Doomsday completely destroying the hell out of Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter in quick succession. He even destroys Wonder Woman's magical sword with only his knuckles. And then it becomes ridiculous that Superman is able to take him down. Because it's not like he's destroying just Guy Gardner and Fire and Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. Because then it becomes more plausible that it would go down to a matter of strength. But Superman, especially a younger one, who has just the basic amount of superpowers, it's like, okay, how is he not killing Superman? And eventually, yes, he does kill Superman. So Superman getting that lucky punch in at the very last second, even though he's already dying from his injuries, there's no hope for him at that point. It does stretch it a little bit. And there's also some parts about that fight. And let me tell you, the fight is pretty much the entire last half of this 1 hour and 20-minute movie. It's amazing. But there are some parts of that fight where Superman does come off as very reckless. And sometimes not even in an interesting way. He does some really dumb stuff, like tying Doomsday to the cables of a suspension bridge, which of course causes the bridge to start to collapse and all these people fall into the water and probably die. Or when he punches Doomsday through a huge section of the bridge, causing cars to fall into the water. It's like, okay, I know we're supposed to think that people probably vamoosed from there, but we don't properly know. And so it feels like there wasn't that much focus put onto the pragmatics of the fight as was in the original. There's also some other things and some other odds and ends whose omissions really got to me. Like there's this beautiful moment before Superman dies where he's distracted from going to the main fight because he's at a school assembly giving a poignant speech about sacrifice and putting your life on the line, which is meant to counterpoint this. And this, he's mainly distracted from the fight because he's on a date with Lois where he's trying to give away his secret identity. And that moment itself, that scene is pretty good. It just doesn't contrast well with the fact that Doomsday is destroying entire miles of cities and killing pretty much the Justice League and all these civilians. Because that should be like priority number one, you think, right? Because there are destructions along the way in the original comic where Superman is actually trying to help people while also heading toward Doomsday. He has to help these people on the way to Doomsday. And they kind of miss that. And it feels very unbalanced. There's some things that are unbalanced about this movie. One of the things is the introduction of Hank Henshaw, who, if you don't know, eventually becomes the cyborg Superman. And in his scene, they have to streamline pretty much all the introductions to the replacement Superman. You have a small introduction to Superboy, you have a small introduction to Future Steel, again, not his proper introduction, which was, again, like I said, in a previous movie. And to streamline with Hank Henshaw, he's in space and they get hit by Doomsday's asteroid, and Superman does nothing. He's not even busy at that point, and they're yelling for Superman, and Hank Henshaw is like saying, "I believe in you, Superman, you'll save me," and then he explodes in a huge fiery crater of death, while his family and friends drift off into the coldness of space dead as well. And this movie doesn't hold any punches, I'll tell you, by the way. People get like fucking torn to pieces and their heads get crushed like grapes on screen. It's fucking amazing. Anyway, as I was saying, in the original comic, the whole backstory between Hank Henshaw was that Superman actually tried to save them, and he actually did. They just died on Earth due to complications that were unforeseen, which adds a much more tragic element to it. Well, in this one, Hank Henshaw is very naive. He comes off as very, very tunnel-visioned with regards to believe Superman. Like, that's his last words. Everyone's like saying, "We're gonna die, please, no." He's just like, "No, we're not. We're gonna get out of it because Superman's gonna save us. Superman's gonna save us." It feels so rushed. It feels like such a way to create pathos down the line when he's revealed as Cyber Superman. While other introductions like the Eradicator, he's introduced in such a perfectly subtle way that I didn't even know it was him. I had to slap myself on the back of the head after the movie was over. Like, of course, that was the Eradicator. I'm a fucking idiot. Honestly, I enjoyed this movie for what it was. Like I said, there are some things which I felt worked because of the streamlining, and some things that were really sort of missing a core aspect of it. Like having John Henry Irons as a scientist in Star Labs, being a fanboy Superman, that's okay. Just doesn't have the exact sort of component where you have that scene where Superman saves him and then he becomes a second Superman. He comes trying to find a way to live up to the second chance Superman gave him by saving his life. And nor does it have that whole bit where he eventually has to climb out from the rubble of the destruction that Doomsday left in the fight's wake by himself, screaming and shouting, "Gotta stop Doomsday." There's nothing like that. You just see him making the steel suit. That's it. And I felt like that was a missed opportunity. But if I had to just really put all that out of my mind, it's a good movie. Especially if you're invested in this series. Especially if you're really looking forward to seeing how all of this coalesces together. The tease at the very end, there's like 5 different post-credit scenes, each to highlight a different replacement Superman. And they're all really well done. The production team and Peter Tomasi really did pick great little moments and great little beats to introduce the replacement Superman. You have Superboy just punching his way out of the DNA alien lab at Cadmus, and Fire going about, he just grabs the leather jacket. That was fucking brilliant. And like I said, you have Steel making his steel suit. You have the Eradicator forming a body and then creating a fortress of solitude while stealing the rocket ship. And you have Cyborg Superman just looking menacingly, flying toward the screen as he fade to black. It was really exciting. It was really exciting. And I can't wait to see these characters in the part 2. But like I said, overall, Batman vs. Superman is probably the most accurate, at least in keeping with tone and keeping with the emotional heft of a lot of these scenes. Well, this one was just a perfectly adequate and honestly pretty decent retelling for this series. It's definitely head and shoulders above what Superman Doomsday did. Doomsday isn't very complicated. He's a rock monster. He's a rock monster Superman. That's pretty much all you need to do to get it right, and still manage to fuck it up. The Death of Superman, though, it's pretty good. I don't recommend watching the other movies. This works well enough on its own despite the stuff that isn't even there. And hopefully I'll go back and I'll try to see that scene where Steel is reduced in Throne of Atlantis. And maybe I'll see if I can edit into this one as a prologue or something, because honestly, that whole narrative and that whole character arc is one of the core things. And even if they didn't pay it off well enough, it was still pretty exciting to see. And hopefully the Reign of Superman and the Return of Superman movie that they're probably going to bone together is going to be well worth it. I can't wait to see Superboy. I hope he's still the Metropolis Kid. I hope he's still completely 90s focused. And I can't wait to see all these moments that are so iconic. I really hope they destroy Coast City. That entire bit is fucking amazing. I hope that Eradicator makes his last stand against Mongol and Cyber Superman. I hope we see Bibbo as the replacement Superman, where he just puts on his old sweats and decides to live on in his image to honor his memory. Like, these moments are so fucking brilliant. I hope we see him. And those parts don't have to be so relegated to this universe. They work perfectly just as moments as themselves. So honestly, that gives me more hope that we will see them. Anyway, thank you for listening on to this huge rant about this series. If you have any sort of interest in it, there's the new omnibus that came out that's brilliant. It collects pretty much everything you need to know. other than the News Time fake magazine. Or better yet, check out the Roger Stern adaptation, The Death and Life of Superman, which was my first introduction to Superman anything outside of the cartoon. And it is a brilliant novel, and it tells the story so excellently. And I had hoped that this movie, if it had been standalone, would have been more based on that, because all the things in that novel are just so pitch perfect. Honestly, I'm excited. I really am. Anyway, let's move on into listener questions. Our first question comes from the ever incomparable Medea, and their question is, what is my favorite / least favorite single arc / plot of a run or series that I love? Now, to go with least favorite first, because that's always more fun to talk about. I have to say, The Fear of the People, just the entire back half of it. Now, The Fear of the People is probably the most disregarded segment of the New Gods other than Jimmy Olsen. And that's mainly because they're not the most interesting plot point. They're not the most interesting setup or framework for a series. It's just kids going around being all groovy and wearing cowboy hats and all sorts of eccentric stuff. But even then, 90% of the stuff that people really do connect with the fourfold stands for them. And that entire first half of that series is nothing but hits. Justifiers, Glorious Godfrey, The Anti-Life Equation in full, The Omega Effect, all this craziness, all this stuff just comes directly from the original first half. Second half is some sort of crazy, but not in a good way, and honestly incredibly dull plot with Deadman. He's around for like 2 or 3 issues, and it's completely boring and baffling. Definitely least favorite, because I just can't get through it. It's so mind-bogglingly boring and bland, and it's just the weirdest idea for a crossover. And it really did show that maybe there wasn't enough of a wealth of creativity, or maybe there was some interference where they couldn't just have the freedom to explore more of the actual concepts of the series. So it just felt insanely out of place. But for favorite arc or single plot, that's a trickier question. But if I had to pinpoint out anything, it would probably have to be the Death Race arc of American Vampire, because I know it's not a series that I go on about as much as other things on this show, but American Vampire is probably Scott Snyder's strongest and hopefully most enduring work, and I hope he goes back to finish it one of these days. But for that arc, Death Race is just an amazing small little microcosm of fun, entertainment, thrills. It takes the series to the 50s, where you see this greaser who is challenged by a vampire to a race, and they just go at it, and it's nothing but nonstop thrill ride and cheesy corniness and actual sort of horror. It's insanely fun, and it says a lot about it, where that kind of cornball encapsulation is one of the most iconic parts of that entire series. So yes, definitely that. And there's many more I'm probably skimping out on, but that's just one I want to talk about just a little bit and give a shout out to, because it was just such a great time. Our next question comes from Moon at Govatem, and their question is, what are my thoughts on a new Wildstorm, just for someone who kind of read it around it as a comics universe, like just Authority and Planetary? Now, like I said earlier in the episode, I love the new Wildstorm. I think it's amazing. But in overall sense, this is definitely the high mark of Jim Lee's legacy. And it's no wonder why they're taking such care in order to create this maxi series of 24 issues, and why it's getting such a polished and really sort of thought out relaunch. Because if you were co-publisher of one of the biggest comic book companies of all time, then of course you would put all this quality and talent onto these crazy ideas you had. You would definitely try to make those your critical darlings in any kind of way you can. And the Wildstorm is the perfect, probably, success of that. In the Wildstorm, with Ellis undertaking it, it is such a loving reappraisal of it. And if you'd read stuff like Authority and Planetary, then I definitely recommend jumping into it, because it is very much in that same kind of vein, where it takes the universe maybe a bit more seriously. It takes it a bit more to a further excess of sci-fi, with the original sort of core ethos of it from Jim Lee and Brandon Choi and all that. It was very much a bombastic and very cheesy sense of science fiction, where it was more about the action, about laser guns, about alien races, alien invasions, all this sort of blockbuster or B-movie kind of stuff. And Ellis just takes it and still keeps that stability, but brings it around to a bit more of a grounded and a bit more of a dire and actual weight and stakes sort of realm. Especially with the Wildstorm, it takes stuff like I said, Gen 13, which was simply about these really riotous and freewheeling young adults, and really just creating the most pathos-filled and heartbreaking foundation to it. And it still might actually be able to work with it because it would create such a great sense of contrast and legacy between those characters in that mold. It takes such fine care of it. And while it's also creating, like I said, a more realistic, a bit more grounded sense of just this crazy kitchen sink universe that Jim Lee created, it's not losing touch with the campier and excessive sense of itself. It's not negating it, but it's relocating it. I think I might have mentioned this a couple episodes before, but an artist like John Davis Hunt, the action scenes in this series are fantastic, and they are really the actual remaining vestiges of the original Wildstar universe, where you have these bombastic and insane and probably maybe a bit ridiculous action scenes, and you have that sort of sensibility evolved into the action scenes in this, where you have Grifter and Spartan and Zealot just completely demolishing scores and scores of nameless goons in the most amazingly acrobatic and intense ways possible, with only just a handgun. And it's so ridiculous and insane and crazy, and I love it. It's taking a lot of things to task, and it feels a lot more cohesive. And I hope that even if the spin-offs don't really coalesce in a great way, like the Michael Cray spin-off, which is the relaunch of Deathblow, and it's spun off around issue 7 of this main series, it's pretty crap. It loses the main sense of Deathblow, which was to be a fun and maybe even very tension-filled comic about this guy who's really good at killing. The main Deathblow series, the most iconic run of that, which was collected into the deluxe edition a few years ago, about him going on this quest to destroy the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. It was amazing and very, very excessive and bloody, but still, it was pretty great. This new series is just him killing really, really cheap and two-dimensional evil versions of the Justice League. And I guess the last couple of issues are going to be about him fighting evil Wonder Woman in the most boring ways possible, because the artist can't do action, the writer doesn't care about the action, and a lot of these action scenes only last like 2 panels. That's not fun. That's not engaging. That's not exciting. So honestly, it's a bit of a half bag. But the main series, it really does put in the work. And I think that while there are some fans who miss the excessiveness of this stuff, who miss the cheesy, corny, and immature sense of it, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It definitely gave it a lot of flavor. But there's still a lot where you are seeing where things are going. It does feel like a step forward for a lot of these properties. And honestly, it's well worth it. Our last question comes from Eggmath at MathGC30, and their question is, what obscure / little known superhero comic or run am I quite fond of and would like to recommend to others? Now, honestly, I think all of what I read outside of just like the big names are going to be a bit more obscure because, that's how it rolls. My favorite little obscure runner series, I'm going to say Vibe, right? Like I mentioned last week. It's still something that definitely deserves the love and respect of it. OMAC, Jack Kirby version as well, also deserves that. The Keith Giffen and Dan DiDio OMAC as well, all 3 terribly cut short in the prime of their lives even. It's unfair, and they all 3 deserve so much better, and there's countless more that were just cut short despite being completely brilliant that I definitely recommend. Dial H as well from New 52. That just got a deluxe edition. That actually got an actual collection with care put into it that not even the Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen run ever got. It got a trade, but it's not the best trade. I'll tell you that. I still cherish it because that's the only time I'll ever be able to collect this series. But stuff like that, Vibe by Jeff Johns, Andrew Kreisberg, Sterling Gates, and both OMACs, definitely. So yeah, there's probably more I'm picking out, but at this point, you really do have such a wealth of superheroes that you're gonna miss some stuff out. And in all of this, I have to say, Priest and Bright's Quantum and Woody as well, because I know those had new trades released last year or the year before in great condition. So definitely, I know I'm cheating by naming all these, but I have to because I don't want to leave anyone out. But I gotta cut it off there. Thank you for the question, Eggmath, and thank you all for the questions. Thanks to everyone else who listened and for all your continued support of this show. As always, it's been a pleasure. Down below, like I said, you have a link to where you can buy tickets to the Snagglepuss stage play, as well as links to my social media at Twitter, where you can weekly send me questions, comments, or thoughts, which I will then discuss on the show at THE_SNICKMAN, as well as a link to the wonderful person who created the cover art at DOTEMCEE. Thank you, and have a great week. See you next time.